Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production. We have another exciting Lexi-based video. Because if you weren't sick of Lexi yet, well, you better buckle up because Lexi is well, she's here for now. I think she got quite a few LL points, but she's still quite a few off from actually even with Nats, I guess. Anyways, I digress here. I
Yeah.
am joined by the 2021 Canadian National Champion. I'm gonna go from first, and I'm gonna do the last one. The first place calling Las Vegas winner. And the reason I said these two specifically is because Yuki was on Lexi for both of them. Very different decks here. But this is Yuki Lee Bender, one of my locals here. This is just gonna be a local week because I had Eli on Tuesday here, so it's just gonna be just going through all our Lexi mains. Lexi, I was about to say Lexi, say hi for the channel. You're just Lexi now.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Eric. It's actually been a while since we've done some content together. It's always nice chatting with you, and it's good to see other locals on the channel as well. So, pleasure as always to be joining you on Spark of Genius.
Yeah, I mean, well, Bright Light's coming out. I'm sure we'll do some nice, good old limited content. But for now,
Yeah.
we do have, as you can see, for all the players. This is Yuki's Las Vegas list. She did do a deck tech. Go check that out on the Bauble. She goes through it in painstaking detail. I think she goes through like every card very, 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 very literally. I watched that. I remember seeing. I definitely learned some stuff, and I was there when she made the deck. So it's definitely a good watch. But this is mainly a tips and tricks, and I feel like nobody's put out any kind of videos like this, and it's quite useful because a lot of people are going to be picking this deck up that have never played Lexi at all, or maybe have played a little bit in like Armory or something like that, and they're maybe bringing it to the upcoming ProQuest season. Maybe they're bringing it to their Nats, which is where this will come out on the Thursday right before Nats, essentially. So if you are playing on the third week of Nats, this might be useful. But we're going to go through essentially a couple main points that keep coming up over and over again in Lexi play. And of course, who better to talk about it than Yuki, honestly. So we're going to go here. We do have the screen, so I will be bringing up the cards as we're kind of talking about them as more of a visual aid in case you're curious on what these cards do. This is the Fabry list that we'll be working with. It is available, it is public list. So we're going to start off kind of with the first main topics here, which is equipment. And I feel like equipment is a bit of an anomaly in Lexi because she has such a diverse suite. She has stuff that works at instant speed, stuff that like breaks at different points, like New Horizon. You may not want to break so early. So and the arm piece literally just changed. I mean, she used to wear bullseye for like the longest time, and now that was gone. So people were kind of scrambling here. But Yuki, we're just gonna kind of go into the first couple here for equipment as far as like tips on when to block with these, priority block with these. So I think the two main ones we're going to be talking about is New Horizon, and then we'll
Mhm.
talk about Hornet Sting because those are the ones that people are going to be running in pretty much every matchup. And then because
Yeah.
we're not going to go into like Trench, Tunic, Perch, stuff like that. That's too much variation. But Hornets and New Horizon are the main one. So kind of talk me through Hornet Sting first.
Yeah, so Hornet Sting is not the most incredible piece of equipment, but it does have some good uses. Usually, in most matchups, if they have a like 4 or 7 breakpoint that has an on hit, you're probably hoping to block that. So, like an Endless Arrow against Alexi would be a good example. A Snatch against a Briar would be a good example. Really useful for soaking up that breakpoint, and then maybe you get the 1 damage as well. So that's kind of the main thing. If you are playing against another Lexi player specifically, I would opt to like if I have an opportunity to use it to block a 4, I would probably take it very early just because drill shot is a threat. And if you don't use it, you might not be able to later, or you might have to use it on a drill shot, which is like not really where you're hoping to be. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Against other matchups, Dromai, you can kill an Ashwing with it potentially to stop a bigger turn or save yourself some extra life. That can be quite nice. And then into some decks like Bravo, I'm often hanging on to it and either using it to try and like dampen a crush effect. Like you can block Tunic, Hornet Sting, and a 3 block on a Starstruck, and that blocks 5. You still get crushed, but you can do something like throw a CNC back, which is nice. The other common place to use this is if you know you're going to be 3 of a kinding, and like maybe you have to block with some cards. You have a 3 of a kind, you have a Rain Razors, and you really want to hit some arrows. The Hornet Sting to hopefully flip an arrow on top, but even if it doesn't, if it flips like a codex or something, it will actually bottom that card, which sometimes can be a little painful. But if you are hoping to get that 3 of a kind and have some arrows there, the Hornet Sting does kind of like if it's an arrow, it stays on top. If it's not an arrow, it digs you one card deeper, which is
Mhm.
sometimes exactly what you want. So if there's no like super good on hits, that's usually how I'm using it to kind of fix for three of a kind.
Yeah, I think the like the big tip there is I don't think people realize this is kind of like an opt-ish,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, I hit three of a kind off Hornet Sting, so obviously I don't do it properly. But if you want to win, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to get like a non-attack. And what this does is it helps that potent brick that we all really dislike in Lexi. And that one arrow could be like the difference. Like that arrow, like as the fourth card, getting that arrow could make all the difference between actually having a good turn, because maybe there's
Yeah.
a arrow behind that and then you quiver, right? So like it could actually like be multiplicative here. Speaking of quiver, let's talk a little bit about quiver of rustling leaves here, as we'll just transition one to one and we'll go sideways here. Quiver of rustling leaves. We're not going to talk about abyssal depths here because that's not really used in most matchups.
Mhm.
What are some kind of, you have like a spicy tip on maybe like when you want to use this, or kind of interesting ways you can use quiver in different matchups?
Yeah, so there's a few things. The first thing is that Quiver is not an equipment that you use every game. In general, I'm not looking to just kind of like, oh, I could hit Quiver. I'm not looking to do that. It's usually if I wind up with extra cards, and that usually means on three of a kind turns, I draw an extra blue. I can't play it. I can't arsenal it for the next turn. I'll quiver and see what I get. But usually trying to be like, well, this blue arrow is not that good. I'm gonna activate quiver and see if I get something better is not the way to go, because for starters, you could whiff.
Yeah.
And even if you don't whiff, you might just hit another blue arrow and then you haven't really upgraded your hand at all. So it's not really worth the variance. Because usually that, like a lot of the blue arrows in this deck are one cost that have on hits anyways. So even if you hit the red, like you're getting like two more damage most of the time. And taking on all that risk to get two more damage isn't usually worth it. So you usually want to go for this when it's free, or in spots where you just need to push lethal, and hitting quiver is the only way you can take an extra card from their hand, and you have to take that chance. That's what you got to do. So I think that quiver gets a little bit overused by a lot of players, and it's really like a lot of the times I will go an entire game without activating it, but when you do have the extra resources, it's very nice to have, and it can set up some big turns. Keep in mind that it's an instant, so you can do things like if you attack with the last arrow in arsenal and you have extra cards in hand, you decide this is a quiver turn, you can quiver before you snaps and see what you hit and then go, yes, I want to snaps and keep attacking, or no, actually, I don't want to snaps. I'm just going to pass my turn. So you can do that during the reaction step after they've already committed their blocks, and then kind of make an informed decision. And that's usually the best timing for it.
Mhm.
If you're in a spot where you would have to snaps.
Yeah, I think that's like, if we had to break it, if we had to TLDR this from like beginner to intermediate, don't just use this to upgrade a blue arrow. Save this for spots where you really need an arrow for like forcing lethal. And I think the expert tip is like layering that you just kind of
Mhm.
mentioned with snaps. It's like when you attack, you don't have to give it go again. You can quiver. If you don't have another arrow, you automatically get a load and see what it is before you do the snaps. Instant speeds, this, I mean, attack reactions and instant speeds are on the same kind of speed level, so this will
Yeah.
resolve before your snaps, or if you have to, or whatever you'd like to do here. So that is pretty nice, pretty handy piece of equipment here. So we're gonna roll right into the other piece, Voltaire. Right, and Voltaire is a hell of a drug. This is a card that eventually will be gone, but for now, the tails, the last tails weapon is hurting us here. So tell me a little bit about Voltaire. What are your thoughts? What are your kind of tips and tricks for using Voltaire?
Voltaire is just an amazing weapon, gives you action points, can also give you extra power on your arrows, which is quite nice. Choosing when to do this is pretty interesting. Sometimes you want to use go again on your second arrow, threatening your last arrow, and sometimes it's just a threat because it doesn't like if you put an infecting shot to 5 or 6, it usually doesn't affect how they can block that much. And sometimes you may want to commit your last arrow if they're really not giving you their hand, or you can put them in a spot where you infecting shot for 5, you have an endless arrow in arsenal, and if they block out the infecting shot, your endless just kind of hits them for free and comes back. And if they don't block out, you can just go, well, you ate the infecting, I'm going to leave my endless and keep my arsenal because I don't want to go off arsenal. So you can do some tricks like that. But a lot of the time, it's just worth to go +1 if it's your last attack. Don't get, you can definitely get too cute with trying to do these mind games that don't necessarily matter. It's often if you usually do it in situations where your decision changes depending how they block. Um, once again, we talked about instant speed. Voltaire is an instant, so you can do things like there's a few things. You can Voltaire for no particular reason. So if you just want to filter your hand, you don't have to load an arrow. You can it's a May on the load, and you can activate Voltaire even if you don't have an arsenal available. So you can just pitch a card to Voltaire if you're going second and your hand's really bad, but you don't want to commit 2 cards out of your hand because you're afraid of what your opponent might swing. You can just filter 1 card, and that's a totally acceptable thing to do. You can respond to discard triggers with Voltaire to pitch them. If you're getting crippling crushed and the last 2 cards in your hand are going to get discarded anyways, you can potentially pitch both of them. If it's like a red and another card, you can pitch both of them to keep those cards in your deck. And then it being an instant comes up a lot against Icelander as well. You can do things like they channel like frigid you when you flip up a card in Arsenal, and you can load in response to avoid paying that channel like frigid tax on your first Voltaire activation. I think that it being an instant is super relevant against Icelander to get around those frostbites and that channel tax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Getting too cute is something I've definitely seen a lot of newer players try to mind game, especially like an open event. I think the more expert tip against Icelander specifically is like really big, especially when you have like no arsenal. Like when you have an open arsenal and a tunic, you just respond with channel by like tunicking, pitch a blue, load, and have the 2, give go again and +1, and you could just pay an extra 1 with 1 more card and be able to fire like 2 arrows and like a lightning press, and then your turn is kind of like okay regardless. Uh, and timing windows are so important. And the fact that instant speed is just a little on the broken side, to be honest, with you to be able to like respond to essentially whatever you want with like
Yeah.
a combination of Voltaire and Tunic for that matter. Um, so that would be like something I would definitely like echo, especially in the Icelander, because like every percent matters in that matchup because you can't lose as Lexi versus Icelander by
Mhm.
not like min maxing these kinds of plays. I think the last piece we'll kind of talk about is New Horizon, mainly kind of when to block with this card. I feel like everyone is like, when you're gonna die, you block. But are there situations where you might want to block? Maybe specific on hits are just super bad, or just like some kind of value proposition with this card, or what do you think about this?
Yeah, there's a few things to consider. It's a card that often you don't want to block with because the game gets considerably harder to close out afterwards. And if you wind up in these spots where you're trading like 2 card hands back and forth, like you attack them for 5, they attack you for 5, and you're both blocking 2 cards because you're really low. Sometimes having access to that extra arsenal is one of the ways you can pull ahead. You can do something like tunic in a 0 cost attacks for 5. I get to arsenal a card. Now I have 2 cards and I can present 2 attacks. And that's like one of Lexi's big strengths. So usually you don't want to block with this, but sometimes you can to push lethal or to avoid dying, of course. And other things that matter too is I often like paying attention to if I have cards like snaps, I'm more okay with blocking because then you can still arsenal an arrow and give that go again and do the same trick to pull ahead. It only works once, but sometimes that's all you need. If you can present 2 attacks for 4 and they're at 1 life,
If
you're
they're low
probably
enough, yeah.
taking their whole hand. Yeah.
Mm.
So snaps makes me way more incentivized to use this. And to a lesser degree, Quiver does. Like if it's against a deck that blocks pretty well, like Dromai or Bravo, and I'm worried about closing out the game, I'm keeping in mind like, do I have snaps? Do I have Quiver? How many cards do I have that play nicely out of Arsenal? So things like Falcon Wing, Premeditate, um, even Codex is a way to get like a third attack, because sometimes there's a concern is like, how do I get a third attack to actually kill them? And you want to make sure that you're going to be able to do that. So I'll take a quick look at all those ways to get a third attack in to actually close out the game and make sure I have some left before blocking. But often you are not blocking with New Horizon until very late in the game.
That's fair. Yeah, I think the main tip here is that, obviously to not die, New Horizon's a good
Yeah.
block. But even if you have enough tools to close out the game, such as snaps, quiver, these go again arrows, Codex are a big one. I think Codex is like probably
Yeah.
one of the cards very good, obviously, and you did win the calling with it, so it is very clear how good of this card because you literally blocked with New Horizon and then won the game off Codex the next turn. Oh man, I wish I recorded that game now. But that would be super nice to just show people. But anyways, the point is, I think the main tip you mentioned was you can, like, I feel people are too scared of blocking with this card. They think they just
Mhm.
lose, but you don't necessarily just lose if you have enough tools to especially go for that third arrow. Very,
Yeah.
very good. So these are the equipment kind of tips and tricks you can bring to the game. The second main topic we want to talk about, we'll do Command and Conquer because I think that one is everyone just kind of gets a really worried look on their face when they see CNC on the board and they're playing Lexi. And I think the two situations we want to talk about is when and how to block this card when they have no pitch up and when they have two pitch up and they have a possibility of having a pummel. So these are decks like Bravo, which they could very easily have a pummel. There are I guess there could be other decks that also run the pummel, but Bravo is probably the main one because that one is like still in the meta. Like Bravo is coming up in some of these games here. So I think we'll kind of start with what are the situations where you're kind of blocking different amounts of cards on CNC?
So the most common block is with 2/3 blocks, which usually means 2 arrows. Ideally, you have 3 of a kind in this spot to just refill your hand. Like you keep a blue and a 3 of a kind, and that's like the ideal, but of course that doesn't always happen. But it's also worth considering what card is in your arsenal. If your hand's really, really good and you have like a blue, I don't know, a blue sleep dart in your arsenal, and sleep dart is not the best arrow in this matchup. Sometimes it can be correct to just take 6 and let that happen. Usually it isn't. Very often you want to block the CNC with 2 arrows, but sometimes it is a case where your hand is just really good and it's not worth giving up any of your cards. The rest of the time, you're usually trying to block and piece together a good turn with the remaining cards. Things like having a 0 cost arrow in Arsenal help a lot with this, especially if you have Tunic. You can do something like Tunic, Searing Shot from hand, Searing Shot from Arsenal, and then you've presented like 8 with 2 on hits, and you still get an Arsenal or red. And so in that case, you're often blocking with your blues and just making sure you set up a good Arsenal for next turn. And that's like a very common play pattern into CNC or into really anything that has an on hit that you have to block. So you're often kind of considering how much total damage am I presenting if I keep my hand versus like how much damage do I stop plus present if I end up blocking out. And I think that Tunic and 0 cost arrows are like some of your best friends in these low resource situations or like low hand size situations. Also, you mentioned when they're representing pummel.
If they have two floating, you don't know for sure, but they can have it. They still have a card in arsenal,
Yeah.
a card in hand.
Yeah. So what I would say is that if they've blocked or if they've taken damage and kept an extra card in their hand, it's like very likely that they have the pummel. It could also be Sigil of Solace against Bravo, so it's a little bit tricky. But it's very likely you have the pummel, and so you're kind of weighing more on that. Often it is right to just block 10 on this, at least 10, 10 or 12 on this. And particularly if your arsenal is very good, sometimes what you want to do is just block 12 and go, yes, you get to keep the pummel for next turn, but maybe you took a bit of damage to keep this hand, and I'm going to kind of wait till next turn when you can pummel me, but you don't have quite, like, it's not going to be Command and Conquer. Like, I'm fine with you pummeling your choke slam, just not Command and Conquer.
Yeah.
And that's a common thing to do if your arsenal, usually if you have like a really premium arsenal, so maybe you have like a red arrow and a 3 of a kind, or a red arrow and a rain razors. Those are the most common ones where you're like, I really need this hand to kind of line up. I don't want to lose a rain razors or a 3 of a kind from my deck, and I'm just gonna go ahead and block out, and that's the way to go. So if your arsenal is premium, don't be afraid to overblock it, and the rest of the time try and block it out and see if you can leverage your small hand with some of the cheap arrows.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the. Do you ever bring in like? Is there ever a card you really want to keep? I guess an instant would be like the one I'm thinking about. But you like block with like 3/3 blocks and Hornet Sting or something like that, and I mean, if the other card doesn't block, let's say it's press, right, and you kind of have to do that. Um, but what about a situation where, let's say, you have two instances? Are you just kind of doomed, or how do you get around that if you can? Let's say you have 2/3 blocks in two instances that are representing pummel. Do you just give them the 6, or do you just say like take it and then you might get like a card from my hand and you'll play like a 3 card hand? What do you think?
Yeah, it's sort of hard to say. It's a little contextual.
Yeah,
If often you want to block 6 and make them show you that you have it, but it also depends like how certain you are. Like if they've taken damage and kept an extra card, they likely have the pummel. And it also kind of depends like how well your hand plays out. So if you can afford to discard your hand discard a card from your hand and then still have a pretty decent turn, I might be more inclined to do that. But often when you have two instants and you get CNC'd and they have pummel, it's like pretty rough.
Yeah.
Usually I make them have it, but yeah, it's a feels bad. Usually at least you can arsenal one of those instants, and all the instants are pretty good arsenal targets
Yeah.
because otherwise you wouldn't play a no block.
Yeah, it's the no block has to be pretty good in this deck to
Yeah.
like, Press and Rain Razors are both very, very good cards in a lot of different scenarios. So I definitely echo that statement. The last kind of main topic overarching, and you kind of talk a little bit about it already, is making the most out of your small hand. So when you do have to block those on hits, when you do have to block with either two cards or a card in, well, a card with Hornets thing, you still have three cards in hand if you have two pieces of arsenal. Two cards in arsenal, so 5 card hand is a small hand for Lexi, right? But we're talking about like those 2-3 card total hand, maybe like an arsenal and then two cards in hand. So kind of making the most out of those hands, and when you have to block, how do you, any tips and tricks how to make it go the extra mile?
Yeah, there's a few. Obviously, the most powerful thing you can do on a small hand is three of a kind, either off of Tunic or off of a blue. That's the best way to refill your hand and just kind of keep pushing. Um, I kind of mentioned some of the Tunic lines before, like Tunic with zero cost arrows is very, very good. Sometimes you can even do things like block 9, Tunic, infecting shot from your arsenal. If you have like a red infecting shot, then you're presenting 5, potentially 7. If they don't block, you can arsenal another red of some sort, and that's like a pretty decent turn cycle. So you can almost kind of set up these situations where the arrow in your arsenal is almost like your weapon attack, and then you're arsenaling another arrow. This is actually also part of the reason I like Premeditate and Lightning Pressed, is because they are some of the only cards in the deck that truly cost 0. Your arrows, unless they're already in your arsenal, actually cost you 1 because you need to load them with Voltaire. But if you have a 2-card hand and a 0 cost arrow in arsenal, you can do something like Premeditate Searing Shot or Drill Shot, Lightning Press it. And that's a really good way to present, 7 damage, maybe with an on hit, and then still get a nice red arrow in arsenal, and you've blocked 6 on whatever on hit they were presenting at you. So look for these kind of inexpensive cards as good ways to leverage your small hand. And this is part of the reason that I believe so strongly that you should always be playing Tunic in this deck, is that Tunic really opens up these hands, because suddenly you can play 1 cost arrows from arsenal. Suddenly you can do 0 cost arrow off Tunic plus 0 cost arrow in arsenal, and then arsenal another card. It gives you so many more ways to use your hand. Whereas if you just don't have that extra resource, like it's like often worth a card, right? Because it's like, if I want to pitch, then I have to pitch an entire card and really use all the resources. And so the Tunic resource is often just super, super valuable for that reason.
Yeah, no, the offensive power of Tunic is just kind of astonishing. Even the fact that you remember like this pacer 3 of a kind, just like
Yeah.
you could literally 2-card Tunic 3 of a kind and have a 4-card hand, which is like seems pretty insane when you think about it. But that's just like the power of a legendary chess piece, I guess. Well, I mean, Trench
Yeah.
is also a legendary chess piece. Well, we don't talk about Trench, I guess. So let's just avoid the Trench here. So we're gonna do a couple of faster ones here, just very quickly to round this out. Warmongers, I think people have mixed feeling. In the beginning, they were just like, "This is the bane of my existence," but now they're kind of finding ways to play around it. You don't specifically play Trench, and that's kind of the main thing that other people have like kind of targeted. Even Eli would talk about it earlier. Very, very good into Warmongers. So if you're against a deck that does play Warmongers, what are you doing with your non-attacks? Essentially, are you just always playing them out? Will you ever play one face down and just be like, if they have it, they have it, or what is your thought into that specifically?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to think about there. Often, my default is I'm trying to arsenal an arrow and just play out my non-attacks as I get them. That's usually what I'm trying to do. And if I wind up in a spot where I have a 3 of a kind and I can choose between arsenaling an arrow or a non-attack, I'll try to arsenal the arrow. The idea here is that if they do end up playing Warmongers, you can potentially use Snapdragon Scalers in order to give that arrow go again, and then just kind of play through their turn, and they've given you a card and their whole action to... They get your equipment, but they don't really slow you down, which is the nice part. Lightning Press is a big part of this plan into some decks like Bravo and Icelander, where Lightning Press is not an arrow, but it's also not an action, so you can still play it. And so, even if you do get Warmongers, sometimes you can do something like, well, I'm gonna play this infecting shot and lightning press it, and that's still 8 damage with a blood rot. Like, that's really good. Um, Another tip that I would give too, in terms of like when to arsenal it, is usually I'm tracking their Warmongers. That doesn't mean that I'm memorizing where it is in their deck. I usually don't do that. But I'm keeping track of how many have they blocked with and how many have they pitched, and kind of roughly how far are we through their deck. Are we halfway through the deck and I've seen two? Are we, I've seen two and we've played 2 hands and they're pretty likely not to have the third one. I'm making assessments like that. And I'm also paying attention to how they block when it comes to my arsenal. So we talked before, you're deciding between the arrow and the non-attack. I mean, usually you just want to put the arrow in, but maybe you're deciding between arsenaling a premeditate or just not arsenaling it because of the risk of Warmongers. I might pay attention to how they're blocking. If they have no cards left, they can't Warmongers me, obviously. If they have 1 card left, then maybe the Warmongers is a little bit more scary. If they've kept like a 3-card hand and they're on Bravo, it's like, well, what are they doing here? They're probably doing something like a Spinal Crash or a CNC and Arsenaling or Hammer and Sigil. Like, it's probably not Warmongers because they've kept cards in hand. So pay attention to that hand size. Usually it's when they have 1 card left in hand that you need to be a little bit wary of. Yeah, that might be Warmongers. Maybe I don't want to take the risk on it. But often if they have a bigger hand, you just go, well, there's no way you're just going to choose to like not block and take damage and then play Warmongers just to hope that you get me.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
yeah, taking damage to like 4-card Warmonger is just not it. It's not usually the play that you want to be making. But um the second one here is when you have leftover cards after usually it's like 3 of a kind and you already have a bunch of cards. What is your priority to arsenal at the end of turn? Let's pretend you didn't heat seeker. Let's pretend it's going to be a 1-card arsenal. You have a bunch of cards. What's your priority for what you want to put into the arsenal?
Usually a 0-cost arrow. The
Okay.
idea here is that arrows are good in Arsenal because if you draw into Rain Razors, then your Rain Razors is like pretty set up to be a 3-arrow hand so long as you have the rest of your cards. And the reason you usually want the 0-cost arrow in Arsenal is because usually when you're pitching a blue, you're going to activate Voltaire twice, and that leaves you with 1 extra resource for exactly one cost arrow. So usually you want to do like 0-cost arrow, 0-cost arrow, 1-cost arrow, and that will cost exactly a blue. But the key here is that you need 2 0-costs and 1 cost. And if you wind up with too many 1-costs, you actually miss out on an entire attack, which is not ideal. And so usually arsenaling the 0-cost arrow kind of gives you higher chances of seeing those 2 0-cost arrows. It also lets you do the lines that we were talking about earlier, where you can block out attack with your 0-cost arrow, arsenal another red, and that's really nice. So usually the 0-costs are great. Endless Arrow is a premium one, of course. I also like Bolt and Shot and Falcon Wing against
Yeah.
decks that have Warmongers, kind of getting back to that previous question, because Falcon Wing just has Go again. So if they Warmongers you and you have Falcon Wing, it's like really bad for them. And then Bolt and Shot is nice because even though Warmongers, can force you to blow snaps potentially, if you line up that Bolt and Shot with a lightning press or rain razors in your next hand, like perhaps you just happen to draw into it, you can really blow them out. And it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes you have to snaps, but bolt and shot in arsenal is just really, really good. And even if they don't have the warmongers on those rain razors or lightning press turns, just being able to open up with a bolt and shot right at the start, and they go, okay, I know you have something. I need to figure out if I care about this reload. And then if they try to block to respect the reload, often it means that I don't know, your infecting shot later down the line is really scary for them, or whatever other
Mhm.
arrow you have. So the Bolton shots, especially the red ones, are really good arsenal targets.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And then that you just play it, but you have snaps up. It's like, oh, well, do they have a pump or it just snaps? It could be either. Because then you don't know how to block. So you're really going to give them like 7 block for like to go around rain razors, or just like 8 block to get around lightning press. Like, probably not. Well, I guess plus if they wouldn't have the buff, it'd be 4 to 6. So you get like 2-card
Yeah,
block a Bolden shot. But then if they have press, you just get blown out, right? You just
yeah,
gave them 2 cards and they still get the reload. So definitely one of my favorite cards to Arsenal Bull and Shot also. I
yeah.
guess we'll do one more to kind of finish up here. So you kind of talked about a little bit, but we didn't really go that into it. And it's setting up versus like going in, like essentially playing everything you have versus when you want to set up a 6 card hand. So are there kind of situations that you've seen in the past where you would recommend setting up like a 6 card hand with like a very specific setup? Maybe there's like a matchup or two that you really like it versus just playing everything out and just going for tempo. I know everyone loves it when I use tempo in every statement here. So I'll say like versus going aggressive essentially.
Yeah, so there's kind of a lot to dig into here. It depends on the matchup a ton. A good rule of thumb is if you're playing against a deck that can stop your turn pretty reliably, I usually like to just throw everything at them. So this would be like Icelander, Azalea, for example. Bravo, if you do have remembrances and the threat of fatiguing them, you kind of just want to go full gas at them to make it hard for them to disrupt you and make them really pay. And the idea here is that if Icelander does have the channel like Frigid, well, maybe you can't use your whole hand very well, but maybe you can set up a double arsenal, and that's a way to still get value out of those cards rather than just kind of like, oh, I can't pay for anything. I'm stuck with these cards in hand that don't really do anything. And similarly against Azalea, if you get red in the ledger, well, if you can block with a card, attack with a card, and arsenal a card, like you've kind of used your whole hand. And as long as you're using your whole hand, like the red in the ledger is not that bad. It's when you get stranded, you have a 6 card hand, you're ready to get them, they red in the ledger you, and you block with a card attack, and you're like stranded with 2 cards, and you go, oh, this is pretty bad for me. So decks that can stop your turn, play out your hand. Against other decks, you're often looking to kind of balance when you set up with when you don't. Rain Razors is the main card that I'm sometimes looking to set up and try and get like a lot of value out of. Usually you want to try and get 6 out of this, so off of 3 arrows, you often red ones if you can. But sometimes 2 is okay as well. Like if you're just behind and you need to do something, you need to kind of get tempo back, get some pressure back. If you can put it on like 2 good red arrows, like an infecting shot and a heat seeker, that's good enough. Like often that's just good enough. You're presenting 2/7s with premium on hits. That's good enough. And if you think about that, that's 14 damage. 3 arrows, if they're all like the 4 for zeros, is 18 damage. Like it's not really that different, especially when you factor in the on hits. So don't be afraid to cash it in on 2 arrows, I would say, especially if they're good ones. But a lot of times you are looking to set that up, and it sort of depends often on like how many cards they're giving you too. If you're in a spot where, and this will depend on the deck, but like if you're playing against a Bravo, it's sort of like with a big hand, they can crippling crush or they can starstruck you. And if they're not blocking, you go, well, if you're going to starstruck or crippling crush me, I really need to take you off of that. And then if they're choosing to block down to cards, their like 3-card hand is a Spinal Crush and their 2-card hand is a Command and Conquer. And so you're kind of like evaluating what threats they could have at different hand sizes as they block and paying attention to what's left in their deck too. Because if they've started blocking down and you go, well, I've seen two CNCs already and like we're not that far into the game, like I don't think you have the CNC, or it's not that likely that you have the CNC, then maybe they just don't have anything and you can take that as a turn to set up. So you're kind of trying to evaluate like what the threat level of their hand is. And that's going to, of course, depend on the deck you're playing against. But it's a good idea to think about sort of like, okay, they have 3 cards left. What's the worst thing that they could do? Or they have 2 cards left. What's the worst thing that they could do? Do I need to try and keep pressuring to remove cards? Or am I not really afraid of any of their 2-card plays and I'm just going to take that chance to set up? Those are the types of things that I'm usually thinking about when evaluating, do I set up versus do I not set up? I think some people do, like, in general, get a little bit over attached to setting up, is what I would say. I think people often set up a little bit too much. But yeah.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. It's you just need to get value. You don't need to like over engineer it. Sometimes it's correct to just slam on the brakes or the accelerator. So thank you very much, Yuki, for your wisdom here. But you actually do a little bit of coaching too. So we're if this was a little bit of a taster, if you do want, Yuki does do coaching. I mean, she's good enough, probably one of the best Lexis to get coaching from, in my opinion here. So she goes over, you can go over games, play lines, certain matchups, actually go in and use these, because knowing them is one thing, but that you really gotta, like, it's like studying for an exam. So you can know all the facts, but you gotta apply it to the exam and you gotta practice here. So if you want to take your take your game for Lexi or any other hero that she offers here to the next level, I do recommend go reach out to Yuki, get some coaching, get that a little bit time investment. It goes a long way in Fab. I find that Flesh and Blood is a very complex game, and you're playing a fairly complex deck most of the time too, and that little bit of extra effort really does go a long way. So if you do feel like you want to bring your Lexi, bring down a ProQuest, maybe do well in Nats, you're definitely getting your money's worth here. I'll tell you that much. So go reach out to Yuki on I think Twitter, Discord. What's the main way people can reach you for coaching?
Yeah, either one of those is good. On Twitter at Bender or on Discord at YLBTCG. We can put that in the description. But
We will those will be in the description. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But just to kind of add on a little bit, often it's like things like this. We can really work on whatever you want to work on. If you're not sure what to work on, is another good sign that maybe coaching's a good idea. I can kind of point you in. We can like play a game. I can kind of talk through the lines with you, and we can figure out where some of the leaks in your game are and the things that you can be improving on. Because sometimes players just don't know. They go like, I'm not winning as much as I'd like, but I don't know why. And that's super understandable. Fab's really
Yeah.
complex. So
Very real
yeah.
state.
So
No, for
anywhere
sure.
from like evaluating problems to going really in depth about nitty gritty details about certain matchups to just like fundamentals. I have sometimes new players that just go, I want to pick up this game. I don't have much experience. I don't know where to start. I'm kind of confused. What can we do? And maybe we just do like a lesson on value and how to evaluate when do you block versus when do you attack and which is your best line. Just something as simple as that, which is just like a really fundamental concept. So yeah, if you're not sure, you're on the fence, reach out to me. We can discuss options and what might be available and see if anything seems intriguing for you.
No, for sure. Yuki, appreciate your time as always. I know you're a very busy individual nowadays, so winning all these trophies and money and such. So with that, good luck in Canadian Nats. Obviously, I'll be there too. So I'll say it again during the event, but good luck in the upcoming Nats here. And for that, if you viewers like you like this kind of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any like questions for Yuki, you could put them in the comments. She may or may not reply. She is pretty busy. But with that, from wherever you're watching in the world, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.